Number 1. The Woman from Lemb. In 1878, near the small village of Lemb on the island of Cyprus, a plow turned up a figure carved from pale limestone. She stands with a long cylindrical neck, 2 arms flung straight out to the sides, and a flat, featureless face. Archaeologists date her to around 3500 BC, the Copper Age of Cyprus. She belongs to a whole family of cruciform fertility figures made across the island in that era. To the people who made her, she was almost certainly a protective charm, an amulet tied to a mother goddess and to the hope of children. That is the real object. The legend is something else entirely. Later collectors gave her a darker name. They called her the Goddess of Death. The story goes that her first modern owner, a man remembered as Lord Elfont, lost his entire family within 6 years. The next owner, said to be Ivor Minucci, saw his household destroyed within 4. A third owner, Lord Thompson Knoll, met the same fate. When the Biverbrook family lost members too, the surviving sons refused to keep her and handed her to a museum, reportedly the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh. And then, the tale insists, the curator who first handled her died within a year. Here's where the historian raises an eyebrow. Not one contemporary document confirms that chain of owners. The names drift from telling to telling. The curator dies within a year line appears in a dozen other cursed object stories, almost word for word. What is real is the archaeology. The Lemba Archaeological Project, run by the University of Edinburgh under Edgar Peltenberg from 1976 onward, excavated genuine Copper Age dwellings in this region. And the celebrated Lemba lady is a well-documented icon of the same tradition, often carved from a soft blue-green stone called picrolite. So the figure is real, and she is roughly 5,500 years old. The death list attached to her is not, which raises a question that runs through everything that follows. Why do we insist on hanging a body count on an object that is remarkable enough on its own? Number 2. The Ring of Silvianus. Around 1785, a farmer plowing a field at Silchester, the Roman town of Caleva Atrobatum in Hampshire, turned up a heavy gold ring. It weighs about 12 grams and measures roughly 25 millimeters across, far too large for an ordinary finger. Its bezel carries an image often read as the goddess Venus, and an inscription that names a man, Synicianus. This is not folklore. This is where a real ancient curse enters the story. About 100 miles away, at Lydney Park in Gloucestershire, excavators found a small sheet of inscribed lead at a temple of the god Nodens, a healing sanctuary. The lead is a defixio, a cursed tablet. Its message is blunt. A man named Silvianus reports that he has lost a ring. He gives half its value to the god and asks Nodens to allow no health to anyone named Synicianus until the ring is returned to the temple. The name on the tablet and the name on the ring are the same. Across a century of separation, object and curse appear to point at each other. The person who connected them was Sir Mortimer Wheeler, who excavated the Lydney Temple in 1928 and 1929. Wheeler needed an expert on the strange name Nodens, so he wrote to a young Oxford professor of Anglo-Saxon named J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien was, in those very years, building the mythology of Middle-earth. A lost gold ring, an ancient curse laid on the man who took it, a scholar drawn into the puzzle. It is widely believed that this episode helped seed the idea of the One Ring. The ring is now on display at the Vine, a National Trust house in Hampshire, in a room that openly ties it to the Lord of the Rings. Scholars still debate whether this is definitely the ring named on the tablet, and the oversized band suggests it was worn as a votive offering or a pendant rather than on a hand. But the pairing is a rare gift to researchers, a working example of how Roman people actually cursed one another, which leads to a place where the ancients turned cursing into an industry. Number 3. The Tomb of Timur. Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, lived from 1336 to 1405 and carved out the Timurid Empire from his capital at Samarkand, He lies today beneath a dark green jade slab in the Gur-e-Amir Mausoleum, under one of the most beautiful fluted turquoise domes in the world. His tomb, the legend says, carried a warning. One inscription supposedly read that when he rose from the dead, the world would tremble. Another warned that whoever disturbed his grave would unleash an invader more terrible than Timur himself. On the 19th and 20th of June, 1941, a Soviet scientific team led by the anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov opened the tomb. Their purpose was not grave robbery, but research. Gerasimov wanted to confirm Timur's identity and reconstruct his face using the forensic method he had pioneered. The bones told a clear story. This was a tall man for his time, around 1.7 meters, and he was lame in the right leg and right arm, exactly matching the historical Timur the Lame. 2 days later, on the 22nd of June, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa and invaded the Soviet Union. The coincidence of those dates became the beating heart of the curse. The legend even adds that Timur was reburied with full Islamic rites in November 1942, just before the Soviet fortunes turned at Stalingrad. The historian has to be honest here. Barbarossa was planned many months before anyone touched the tomb. The timing is a coincidence, nothing more, and scientists have a word for the impulse to read meaning into it. Apophenia, the mind's habit of finding patterns in noise. Yet this story endures better than almost any other, and the reason is instructive. The science was real. Gerasimov's facial reconstruction of Timur remains a landmark of forensic anthropology, and his technique is still taught today. A genuine scientific triumph got wrapped in dread and never shook it loose. The next objects show that the ancients did not wait for coincidence. They wrote their curses down on purpose. Number 4. The Roman Curse Tablets of Bath. At Aquae Sulis, the Roman spa town we now call Bath in England, a natural hot spring rose from the ground, and the Romans made it sacred to the goddess Sulis Minerva. Into the reservoir of that spring, worshippers threw messages. Archaeologists have recovered about 130 inscribed sheets of lead and pewter from the water, most of them during work in the late 1970s and 1980s, when Barry Cunliffe investigated the spring. The epigrapher Roger Tomlin then read and translated them, and his edition is the standard reference. They date from roughly the 2nd to the 4th centuries AD. These are not love notes. They are curses, what scholars call prayers for justice. Again and again, a victim of theft asks the goddess to take revenge. The most common complaint is heartbreakingly ordinary. Someone stole my clothes, or my money, while I was bathing. One famous tablet curses whoever stole something called Vilbia, and scholars still argue whether Vilbia was a woman or a valuable object. The curses demand that the thief be denied sleep, denied health, denied blood, until the stolen goods come back. Some helpfully list several suspects so the goddess can sort out the guilty one. The detail that unsettles modern readers is how deliberate they are. Many are written backwards or in scrambled mirror image letters to increase their magical force. They were rolled up or folded and dropped into the spring so the water would carry them down to the goddess. A few show the influence of the local British Celtic language, and one may be the only surviving text written in ancient British. In 2014, the Bath tablets were added to UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. What makes them genuinely eerie is not folklore. It is intent. These are real people, 1,700 years ago, pouring personal, specific hatred onto lead and trusting a goddess to deliver it. This is not a curse we invented later and pinned to an object. This is the object doing exactly what it was made to do. And that same instinct, to fear an object's power, would one day grip a fellow of the Royal Society. Number 5. The Delhi Purple Sapphire. The first surprise about the Delhi Purple Sapphire is that it is not a sapphire at all. It is an amethyst, a purple form of quartz. The misnomer stuck because the legend around it is far more famous than its mineralogy. The story says it was looted from a temple of Indra at Kanpur during the Indian Rebellion of 1857, then carried to England by a cavalry officer, Colonel W. Ferris, whose fortunes promptly collapsed. Around 1890, the stone came into the hands of Edward Heron Allen, and this is where it gets strange, because Heron Allen was no superstitious peasant. He was a barrister, a world authority on the violin, and a fellow of the Royal Society honored for his scientific work on tiny marine organisms called foraminifera. And this rational man of science became convinced the amethyst was poisoning his life. He said misfortune followed it, and that friends who borrowed it suffered too. He claimed he threw it into the Regent's Canal twice, and that both times it found its way back to him. So Heron Allen did something remarkable. He locked the stone inside 7 nested boxes, packed with protective charms, and placed it in a bank vault with instructions that it not be opened until 33 years after his death. He left a written warning advising whoever finally opened it to throw the thing into the sea. He died in 1943, and the amethyst eventually passed to the Natural History Museum in London, set in a silver ring engraved with astrological symbols and flanked by scarab-carved gems. Today, it sits on public display, and curators cheerfully report small disasters, storms, and illnesses whenever they move it. Now, the mineral itself is unremarkable, a decent amethyst and nothing more. Some historians even suspect that Heron Allen, who also wrote weird fiction, embroidered or invented the whole tale for his own amusement. But the image of a serious scientist sealing a jewel inside 7 boxes, hedging his bets against a force he claimed not to believe in, is unforgettable. It is the perfect bridge to an object whose curse was built almost entirely out of newspaper ink. Number 6. The Unlucky Mummy. The British Museum object numbered EA 22542 is one of the most feared artifacts in the world, and it is not even a mummy. It is a painted wooden coffin lid, a mummy board showing the serene face of an unnamed priestess of Amun-Ra from Thebes. It dates to around 950 to 900 BC and entered the museum in 1889. Her gilded arms are folded across a striped headdress. She looks entirely peaceful. The stories told about her are not. The curse legend grew in the 1890s among a circle of London writers, including the famous journalist W.T. Stead. They claimed that men who bought her, or even photographed her, met with accidents, injuries, and financial ruin. And then came the myth that swallowed all the others, that the unlucky mummy was loaded aboard the RMS Titanic, and that her malice sank the ship in 1912. That is simply false. The board never left the British Museum. But the legend had a horrible piece of luck. W.T. Stead, one of the men who had promoted the mummy's curse, really did die on the Titanic, and the two stories fused into one. The tale spread further when the journalist Bertram Fletcher Robinson, who wrote about the object, died young, and his death too was blamed on the curse. Some historians see this whole affair as a rehearsal for the far bigger mummy's curse craze that erupted after the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. The British Museum has debunked the story so many times that it has become one of its most persistent myths, and one of the objects visitors ask about most. Strip away the ghost, and what remains is a genuine, well-preserved piece of funerary art from Egypt's Third Intermediate Period, laid over a wrapped body inside a coffin, honoring a woman who served the chief god of Thebes. The victims in the legend are anecdotes. The timeline contradicts itself. The curse here was manufactured out of words, which makes the next object its perfect opposite, a curse not whispered by journalists, but carved into stone to last forever. Number 7. The Björketorp Runestone. Near Ronneby in Blekinge, in the south of Sweden, 3 great stones stand together, and one of them rises about 4.2 meters, making it one of the tallest runestones on Earth. It was raised sometime in the 6th or 7th century AD, during the Germanic Iron Age, and it is carved in the Elder Futhark, the oldest runic alphabet in the Proto-Norse language. What makes it extraordinary is not its height, it is the message. The Björketorp stone is a curse, one of the oldest surviving curses in the entire Norse world. The inscription, as scholars read it, foresees ruin. It speaks of perdition, of an insidious death waiting for whoever breaks or damages the monument. Another part of the text, sometimes read as a row of bright or fameful runes, seems to carry a ritual charge of its own. The threat is that malign forces will fall on anyone who disturbs it, that they will know no rest. This is not a legend attached to the object later. This is the object itself threatening you, in its own words, across 14 centuries. It does not stand alone in this. The nearby Stentoften stone carries a similar curse, alongside a promise of a good harvest secured through the sacrifice of animals, which hints that these stones sat at the center of ritual life. Archaeologists have debated whether Björketorp marks a grave, but no clear burial has been found beneath it, which only deepens the mystery. The runes are large and cut deep, meant to be read and obeyed. Local folklore adds the expected coda, that a farmer who once tried to burn and move the stone was struck down by sudden misfortune. Runologists have studied the inscription since the 1800s, and its archaic grammar still fuels argument over the exact wording. For scientists, it is a priceless window into Iron Age Scandinavian belief, into a world where the written word was thought to bind and to kill. From a curse that means every terrifying thing it says, we turn to one that science proved was never ancient at all. Number 8. The Mitchell-Hedges Crystal Skull. It is a life-size human skull carved from a single flawless block of clear quartz, complete with a detachable lower jaw, and for decades it was called one of the great impossible artifacts. It is named for the British adventurer and author F.A. Mitchell-Hedges. His adopted daughter, Anna, claimed she discovered it in 1924, buried in the Maya ruins of Lubantun in what was then British Honduras, now Belize. Mitchell-Hedges called it the Skull of Doom, and said it could will a man to death. Legends grew of illness, of visions, of misfortune falling on anyone who mocked it. Its clarity and its uncanny anatomical accuracy convinced believers that no ancient people could possibly have made it, which, of course, only made it more powerful. But the paper trail tells a duller tale. Mitchell-Hedges most likely bought the skull at a Sotheby's auction in London in 1943. No excavation record from Lubantun supports the jungle discovery story at all. Then, in 2008, science ended the debate. Researchers at the Smithsonian, led by Jane McLaren Walsh, and colleagues at the British Museum, examined crystal skulls under the electron microscope. What they found were tiny, regular tool marks left by rotary cutting wheels, technology completely unavailable to the ancient Maya or Aztec. Analysis suggested the quartz itself came from Brazil or Madagascar, not Mesoamerica. Many such skulls were traced back to a French antiquities dealer, Eugène Bobon, in the 1800s. The conclusion was unambiguous. These are 19th and 20th century fakes, and not one crystal skull has ever come out of a documented archaeological dig. And here's the truly interesting part. The debunking barely dented the legend. The skull went on to inspire a 1990 and later a 2008 Hollywood film, and people still speak of its psychic powers. 3 explanations sit side by side. The mainstream verdict that it is a modern carving, the collector's romance that it is genuine Maya, and the fringe belief that it is something stranger still. Science won the argument decisively, and the myth simply refused to die, which tells us something important about how curses actually survive. The next two objects show curses that history seemed to earn. Number 9. The Koh-i-Noor Diamond. Its name means Mountain of Light, and today it weighs 105.6 carats, cut down from an original Indian stone of perhaps 186. It was most likely mined at the Koh-i-Noor mine in the Golconda region of southern India, and its documented history begins with the Mughal emperors, who set it into the famous Peacock Throne. In 1739, the Persian ruler Nader Shah sacked Delhi and carried the diamond away, and he is the one said to have given it the name Mountain of Light. From there, it passed through Afghan rulers to the Sikh Maharaja Ranjit Singh of the Punjab. Then, after Britain annexed the Punjab in 1849, the diamond was taken as a spoil of empire. The child ruler Duleep Singh formally presented it to Queen Victoria, a transfer that historians now recognize as anything but voluntary. And attached to it is one of the most quoted curses in the world. It warns that whoever owns this diamond will own the world, but will also know all its misfortunes, and that only God or a woman may wear it without punishment. That line is why, in British royal tradition, the Koh-i-Noor has been worn only by women. It was recut in 1852 under Prince Albert to sharpen its brilliance, losing weight in the process, and today it sits in the crown made for Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, kept with the crown jewels in the Tower of London. India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan have all demanded its return. Now look closely at that curse, because it is really a history lesson in disguise. Its male owners were blinded, tortured, overthrown, and exiled, one after another. The diamond did not need magic to ruin them. It was the ultimate prize, and men killed and died to hold it. Gemologically, it is a colorless, exceptionally pure Type 2A diamond, and its ownership is among the best documented of any stone on Earth. The curse simply put a supernatural frame around real, brutal politics, and that brings us to the most famous cursed object of them all. Number 10. The Hope Diamond. A deep grayish-blue stone of 45.52 carats, the Hope Diamond has sat at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History in Washington since 1958, and it is the most famous cursed jewel in the world. It was cut from a much larger stone, the roughly 112-carat Tavernier blue, bought in India in the 17th century by the merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. Legend says he stole it from the eye of a Hindu idol and was later torn apart by wild dogs. That is false. Tavernier died an old man in Russia. The stone was sold to King Louis XIV of France and recut into a crown jewel called the French Blue. During the French Revolution in 1792, it was stolen and vanished for decades. A blue diamond matching its profile surfaced in London around 1812 and later belonged to the banker Henry Philip Hope, who gave it his name. The curse, though, was largely a piece of salesmanship. Around 1900, the jeweler Pierre Cartier polished up the legend to help sell the diamond to the American heiress Evelyn Walsh McLean. And McLean's life did fill with real tragedy: the death of her son, the overdose of her daughter, the decline of her husband, and every sorrow was folded into the story. But the Hope Diamond holds one genuinely eerie secret that no marketing invented. Shine ultraviolet light on it, switch the light off, and the stone glows a fierce red-orange for several seconds, a phosphorescence caused by trace boron atoms in its crystal. That same boron gives it its blue color and makes it a rare Type 2B diamond that actually conducts electricity. The diamond came to the Smithsonian when the jeweler Harry Winston bought McLean's collection and, in 1958, mailed the Hope to the museum in plain brown paper by registered post for about $2.44. The mailman who delivered it, James Todd, reportedly went on to break his leg, injure his head, and lose his home to fire. And yes, that too joined the curse. Most historians see the whole thing as coincidence dressed as doom. Yet stand in front of it, watch it burn red in the dark, and you understand why the fear survives. Which leaves one real question. Why do these objects grip even the scientists who study them? Line up all 10 and a template appears. It almost always begins with theft or desecration, an idol looted, a temple robbed, a tomb opened. Then comes a chain of owners, and with each one the misfortunes escalate. Colonial plunder sits at the origin of a striking number of them. The Delhi amethyst, the Koh-i-Noor, the hope, the whole context of the unlucky mummy. The motif of the handling curator who dies within a year repeats almost word for word from the Lemb idol to the mummy legends. Look closer, and you can see the machinery. Newspapers and salesmen manufactured curses outright, from Pierre Cartier to W.T. Stead. Real tragedies were retrofitted as proof, as with Evelyn Walsh McLean and Edward Heron Allen. Our minds remember the hits and quietly forget the misses, a bias so strong it feels like evidence. And the mind seeks patterns even where there are none, which is exactly how two dates in June 1941 became a warlord's revenge. Certain objects attract legends more than others. A crystal skull, a blank-faced idol, a gem that glows red. These already look uncanny, so the story finds them. The older and rarer the object, the easier the myth attaches. And once attached, the legend borrows the same props from case to case. The advice to cast the thing into the sea appears with both the Delhi amethyst and the Hope diamond. The idea that misfortune spreads by touch or by ownership runs through nearly every one, a fear of contagion that treats the object almost like a disease. Notice, though, that the genuine ancient curses in this list, the bath tablets, the Björketorp stone, the Silvianus ring, are a different species altogether. They were intentional. They tell us what the ancients believed. The legendary curses tell us about ourselves. Museums both debunk these stories and quietly benefit from the crowds they draw. And the researchers who handle the objects will admit, if pressed, to a small shiver they cannot fully explain. If the pattern is so obviously human, why does it still work on experts? The honest answer starts with a distinction. A defixio was a genuine ritual technology of the Greek and Roman world. Thousands of these curse tablets survive, from Britain to North Africa, not just from the spring at Bath. They name enemies, thieves, and rivals in love and law, and they assume the gods will enforce whatever is written. The Björketorp and Stentoften stones show the same instinct alive in the Norse north, and the Silvianus tablet is a working example paired with its very object. These curses reveal a worldview in which words, correctly aimed, could wound. Set against that, the curses of the Hope, the Koh-i-Noor, and the unlucky mummy are something completely different. They are stories told after the fact. No ancient text ever calls the Hope diamond or the Koh-i-Noor cursed at the moment of their making. The famous mummy's curse is largely a creation of the 19th and 20th centuries, supercharged when Lord Carnarvon died soon after the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. Real tomb warnings did exist in Egypt, but they were rare and formulaic, and scientists have offered ordinary explanations, such as fungal or bacterial contamination, for some of the deaths blamed on spirits. The difference is simple and sharp. The ancient curses are about intent. The modern curses are about attribution. One is a person choosing to curse. The other is a public choosing to blame. Studying the defixiones teaches genuine social history, the grievances and fears of ordinary people. Studying the legends teaches media and psychology. Both can frighten you, but only one was ever designed to. And the ironic twist is that the real ancient curses are usually the better documented ones. So what happens when a modern laboratory takes one of these objects apart? Every single time, the science dissolves the supernatural and replaces it with something genuinely stranger. The electron microscope exposed the crystal skulls by revealing rotary tool marks their makers could not hide. Provenance analysis traced their quartz to Brazil and Madagascar, thousands of miles from any Maya city. Mikhail Gerasimov's forensic reconstruction turned Timur's bones into hard data: height, injury, identity. Spectroscopy explained the Hope Diamond's blue as the fingerprint of boron, and physics explained its red afterglow as phosphorescence rather than a warning from beyond. Both great diamonds fall neatly into known categories, Type 2A and Type 2B, and that classification is ordinary science, not magic. Conservation specialists read the corroded lead of the bath tablets under carefully controlled light, teasing out mirror-written Latin that had been folded shut for 17 centuries. Runologists date the Björketorp stone by its letter forms and its language, placing it firmly in the 6th or 7th century. Radiocarbon dating and typology fixed the age of the Lemb idol at around 3500 BC and the priestess's coffin board at roughly 900 BC. Archaeometallurgists study the gold of the Silvianus ring and confirm its late Roman craftsmanship. None of these techniques need a curse to explain a single thing they find, and museums quietly keep logs of every so-called mishap and find that the rate of accidents is exactly what you would expect by chance. Under this kind of scrutiny, the curse simply evaporates. And yet, some things survive the lab intact. The Hope Diamond really does glow blood red in the dark. The Silvianus ring really is too big for a human hand. Timur really was lame, exactly as the histories said. Science does not leave you with nothing. It trades the supernatural for the authentically remarkable. What it cannot do, apparently, is stop people believing, because the crystal skull was thoroughly debunked and remains a star. Some researchers even confess to a private unease as they work. So why does the feeling outlast the facts? The answer lives inside the human brain, and it is older than any of these objects. We are pattern detecting animals because a creature that saw a predator in every rustle survived better than one that did not. We assume agency and intention behind misfortune because for most of our history, the dangerous things really were trying to get us. Disasters lodge in memory far more firmly than the quiet days. And confirmation bias then filters the world for anything that fits the story we already fear. There is also what psychologists call the contagion heuristic, the deep intuition that objects carry an invisible essence, that a thing which touched death is somehow tainted by it. That same instinct powered the ancient defixio, and it powers the modern dread of a haunted jewel. Storytelling then compresses the chaos of real life into clean chains of cause and effect, and fear, above all emotions, is sticky and endlessly shareable. A good curse spreads like a rumor, and every retelling adds one more plausible detail. Notice how ritual offers a way to fight back. Heron Allen's 7 boxes, his advice to cast the stone into the sea. These are attempts to reassert control over something that feels alive. And naming a victim, the thief cursed at Bath, the mailman broken by the hope, makes an abstract threat suddenly concrete. There is even a name for the broader instinct, sympathetic magic, the belief that a symbolic action against an object reaches the person it represents, and it underlies both the Roman curse tablet and the modern horror film. The unsettling truth is that knowing all of this does not switch the feeling off. Skeptics still hesitate. The just-in-case instinct persists against all reason, because belief and cognition are not the same machinery. The curse, in the end, is a mirror held up to the mind, not a property of the object. So knowing everything you now know, Could you really hold the Hope Diamond without a single flicker of doubt? Here is what ties all 10 together. Every object in this list is real, even where the curse is pure invention. Their strange power comes from the way they blur three things we normally keep apart: intention, coincidence, and fear. The real ancient curses, the tablets and the runestone, prove that human beings have always tried to weaponize words against their enemies. The legendary curses, the diamonds, and the mummy board prove that we still narrate our own misfortunes and reach for a hidden hand behind them. Science has answered the question of how for every single one. It can tell you the origin, the date, the chemistry, the tool marks. What science hands back to history and psychology is the harder question of why these things grip us at all. And there is a quiet irony in their survival, because a cursed reputation can protect an artifact better than any lock. Dread keeps them famous. Museums keep them visible, and so the fear itself preserves the object. The Lemb idol and the bath tablets sit only a category apart. One a real charm wrapped in a false legend, the other a real curse doing its intended work. The crystal skull shows a myth outliving its own debunking. Timur's tomb shows a coincidence outliving a world war. The Hope Diamond, glowing red in a darkened case, shows that the strange can be perfectly real. We never needed the supernatural to feel the weight of deep time pressing down through these things. To hold a figure carved 5,500 years ago is unsettling entirely on its own. The curse was only ever the packaging. The history is the payload. Perhaps the real curse is our refusal to forget, and these objects terrify us because they connect us, directly and physically, to the dead. That connection is the reason we keep telling their stories, and the fear, in the end, was always ours. The objects only hold it for us.